Hi, this is Ben Ruddle. Who's with us? It's 4 o'clock and it's time to get our meeting started. Is our technology working today?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good. I'm planning on turning my video off. This will be a no video meeting, but I want to just say hi with my face to everybody if you're using it. Marion, am I still chairing today? Has that plan changed at all?
Yes, you are changing. Kurt will be unable to attend tonight's meeting, so you are in charge.
Okay, very good. Can we please confirm that we have a quorum?
We do have a quorum. We have 5 members of the commission attending right now.
Very good. Then let's get started. So I don't chair the meeting very often. Procedurally, I'm going to need a little bit of help to stay on track today. So please, staff, feel free to chip in and help us stay on track. So normally we begin with the approval of last week's minutes, or last month's minutes, I should say. So let's call the meeting to order and let's proceed with approval of minutes from the July 21st meeting. Would anyone like to chime in with changes to the minutes? Or should we go ahead and vote to approve? Okay, hearing no comments, let's vote to approve. I move that we approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
This is Joe. I'll second that.
Okay. And by name, please chime in, commissioners, and vote to approve. Ben approves.
John Nauman approves.
Bills approves.
Joe Lovers approves.
Okay, that's a majority. So let's go ahead and approve and move on to the public participation component of the meeting. Public participation enables the public to address the commission about an item that is not on the agenda. If you wish to address the commission, please state your name and address for the record. The Arizona Open Meeting Law prohibits the commission from discussing or taking action on an item which is not listed on the prepared agenda. The commission members may, however, respond to criticism made by those addressing the commission, or ask staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. Public comments should be limited to 3 minutes reading time per commenter. Do we have any members of the public? I see one hand up from Aaron Young, but I think that may not be a member of the public hand up there.
Commissioner, I was hoping to address something during public comment, but I see we have someone from the public if you'd like to take her first.
Absolutely. I see a hand up from Michelle James, who is a meeting guest. Michelle, would you like to address the commission with a 3-minute comment?
No, I don't have any comment. I just wanted to identify myself as a member of the public. I'm with
Okay.
Friends of Flagstaff's Future. Thanks.
Welcome, and we always appreciate participation from the Friends of Flagstaff Future. Okay, please go ahead, Aaron, with your comment.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Ruddle. I have a special introduction tonight, somebody who's on the meeting, Matthew Sprague. Thank you for turning on your video camera, Matthew. And why Matthew is a special guest is Commissioner Bills is the chairman of an intern scholarship program through the Arizona Hydrological Society. And so about every year, this time every year, we have an intern working with AHS, and Matthew chose to work with the city of Flagstaff for one of his opportunities. The goal of the internship is to introduce our more junior folks in education into areas that they might want to pursue for job opportunities in the future. So we're really happy to have Matthew working with us at the City of Flagstaff, and he's just sitting in today listening to a Water Commission meeting. So with that, thank you for allowing me that introduction.
Fantastic. Thank you and congratulations. Do we have any other members of the public who'd like to make a comment? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to new business. The first item on the agenda, we have three. Those three are stormwater rate assessment update from the staff. We have a commission on council salaries comment also on the agenda, and we have fires and floods, Schultz to pipeline, and interbasin water line on the agenda. Those three items in that order. So first up is Ed Shank. Ed, please give us the stormwater rate assessment update.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Rowe. So Lisa Deem's going to be running the slideshow today. I'll be speaking at the very beginning of it, and then I'm going to hand it off to Sanjay from Water Resources Economics. Today, we're presenting our notice of intent for the stormwater rate adjustment. This is part of our necessary public outreach. This will also be a very similar presentation will be presented at City Council on August 23rd. Next slide. So that overview, this is an adoption of a notice of intent to raise the stormwater rates. Tonight's points, previous council direction, the purpose of this rate adjustment. Talk a little bit, just very briefly, about jurisdictional roles between stormwater and the flood control district. Really just pointing out the things that are black and white. There's plenty of stuff that is gray that's beyond this conversation. The rate basis and policy recommendations, a timeline for this rate adjustment, and then the last one's actually more directed at council for August 23rd. Next slide. Previous council direction on this. So the stormwater section has had rate increases. Well, 2003 was the start of the stormwater section, 2005. 2015, and then most recently in 2018. The last increase was an increase of $1.48 per ERU. That's an equivalent residential unit. That moved the rate up to its current rate today, which is $3.74 per ERU. And the majority of that, or the majority of the reason for that last rate adjustment was to help with funding of capital projects, including the debt obligation for the Rio de Flag flood control project. With this existing rate, we have roughly $600,000 a year that's allocated for other capital improvement projects outside of the Rio de Flag. Next slide. The purpose of this rate adjustment, why we're coming to Water Commission today, as well as council shortly, and then several months of additional public outreach, is due to the increased flood events that we've seen post-fire over the past few years, especially last year and this year, that have created quite an infrastructure problem for us, as most of everybody's aware in this room. Also, it's created quite an increase in demand on our operations, both staffing and equipment. And it's created new flood areas. So obviously Spruce Wash for the museum fire and Schultz Creek for the pipeline fire. The adjustment, the rate adjustment, will address some of the CIP projects identified there, and then also some of the CIP projects that are still languishing under the 2010 NEMADS, the Northeast Area Master Drainage Study. Completing these critical CIP projects, or CIPs, will reduce the flood response operations cost, as we are currently with a really high level of operation cost at the city level. Next slide. So our current rates, obviously we're limited in what we can do in terms of CIP with $600,000 a year. We have a very large increase in operation costs, which is not currently covered by our rate structure. And we have an unsustainable budget that Sanjay will be talking about shortly. The proposed rates that will be going to council later this year will increase that capital funding to allow us to address both the post-fire environment as well as some of our deferred maintenance or deferred CIP, I should say. And some of that will be done through this rate or through the general obligation bond. It really depends on how that election goes. Also, that rate structure will allow us to increase some of our operations so that we can meet some of the needs for pre-season flood mitigation, lack of staffing and equipment, and provide for more comprehensive master planning. And most importantly, it'll hopefully provide a sustainable budget, so we'll be in the black. Next slide, Lisa. Just a quick map of some of the capital improvement projects that will be addressed through this rate structure. There's lots of points here. We tried to group them by either museum fire related, so Spruce Wash, pipeline fire related, which would be Schultz Creek, the Rio Deflag project, and then also other projects mostly identified under NEMADS. Next slide, please. And then with this, I'll introduce Sanjay. I believe we've had a couple meetings now with him for Water Commission, and be very happy to have him back here and let him run the show.
Thank you, Ed. Good afternoon, commissioners, public, and staff. So as Ed has mentioned, we've had first, you can hear me clearly?
Yes,
Yes, we
hear you.
can.
Yes,
Okay, great.
yes.
Just want to make sure technology is working. So first, we've had a series of meetings, as Ed has mentioned, where we've really tried to peel back the onion on stormwater issues and challenges that we face and develop a comprehensive financial plan and needs assessment for this service. One of the first things we did is look at the capital expenditures that's needed. What here you see is a line item of the major capital. We do have much more of a detailed line items. Actually, this is a summary of that. This shows all the major projects, the capital cost expenditures for each one for each year. These are in future dollars. So we have them in today's dollars and we escalated them out for future dollars. And as you can see, these are significant. There's no, shying away from that. Where in 2023, this fiscal year, the plan is to spend almost $0.3 million. The following is $27 million, and I'll be talking about financing and how we're going to fund all this stuff shortly. And then you can see the other years. Of course, in the out years, when we get to 2028, 2029, those are estimates. We acknowledge that. One of the challenges with managing this stormwater utility, and I think we've all experienced this, is the unknowns with fires. And these are what we anticipate, but things can change in a heartbeat. And then we have the totals on all the way to the right column. Next slide, please. So the stormwater, Ed talked a little bit about this, about the program, the jurisdiction. There is some black and whites and some gray. The city is responsible for these specific activities associated with maintenance, capital improvement within the city neighborhoods, assume FEMA flood management responsibility, the stormwater development review and enforcement responsibility, and the MS4 permits. The county is responsible for the unincorporated areas. There are some, gray zones there. And of course, Ed is a specialist in that area and he can talk more about that during our Q&A comments. Next slide. So one of the things that we are looking at is the rates, besides the financial plan, is the ERU equivalency and what that is. And I just want to make sure we're all on the same page on how we assess this charge. So we assess the charge based on an ERU. One ERU is 1,500 square feet of impervious area. Residential tend to have 3, that's the average. There is a max of 5 right now currently as a policy. And commercials do not have a max. It's based on, the impervious area. Next slide. Now, some recommendations on policies that we've been evaluating and discussing is the elimination and suspending of the stormwater credit manual as it's obsolete because of new development. Those new developments already have that. We would recommend that we grandfather that in for existing participants. And also we're recommending to remove the maximum 5 ERUs for residential properties. And that would be in the rate adjustment process. So with the financial, so that was the ERUs and how we assess that. And pretty much that's staying the same. There's some minor adjustments, as I mentioned. But with the financial plan, this is where we really rolled up our sleeves and we started asking ourselves, well, what are the operating costs? Operating costs, I'll show you in the next slide what those are. But, you know, in the first year already, it's a $600,000 increase. There is significant increases. And again, those are all associated with the fires and just managing those fires and dealing with that. As I showed in the prior slides, the capital expenditure is significant. You know, over the next 6 years, the average is $12.7 million. And in order to fund that, we will need a combination of revenue bonds that are anticipated to occur next year of $16 million, Geo Bonds, which the voters will hopefully approve in November, grants that we're anticipating this year and next year, and then cash and reserves that we have and to fund these projects. Now, one of the unknowns in this whole study is how people will consider that Geo Bond that's on the ballot in November. If approved, some of these projects will be funded by the property tax and thus would not show up on the stormwater fee. We wouldn't be assessing people on that. We wouldn't be double charging. Now, if the voters do not approve that, those capital projects still need to occur and we still need to fund that. So that means that now it needs to be funded by the stormwater fee. So at the next time we meet with you, we'll present both of those scenarios. We are on a sort of a fast course here trying to get this done this year. And we are able to show you both of those scenarios and be able to pivot once we know how the voters approve or not approve that ballot. And we hope they do. So let's get into a little bit of the details now. The first table shows the operating budget. The first line, O&M budget, is sort of what you consider the baseline. As you notice, it says 1.8 million, and one thing you'll notice it drops to 1.4. So that 1.8 actually has additional costs that staff has increased for the fire-related costs. So that's why the following year it drops, because it goes back to that baseline. But we know that this operating budget is not sufficient to deal with all the costs that are occurring with stormwater. And these costs are personnel, 2 new personnel individuals, capital equipment, pre-season flood mitigation, and master planning. And so that's all that additional cost there. And so as you can see quickly, the O&M budget is increasing significantly. I mean, if you look at $1.8 million, then in the next fiscal year, we are, $700,000 increase from those 2 numbers. And then you go all the way to 2028, 2029, almost $3 million. And this is all in response to the fires and making sure we have the right response available, the level of service that we're trying to aim for. The bottom chart, remember I showed you the CIP and all the different projects. This shows how we're going to fund it. How much of it's rate funded, how much of it's revenue bonds that we're issuing. So we are issuing one next year of $16 million. And the plan is to issue some more in the out years, grant funded and Geo Bonds. So grant funded, as you notice, we just showed 2 in 23, 24. That's what we know we'll be able to get. We are hoping to get more grant funding in the future, but we don't know if we'll get it. So from a financial planning process, we always plan for the more conservative approach. So we're assuming we don't collect it. If we do collect it, that will help with future reduction in rates increases or potentially reduction in debt amount, and we don't have to issue as much debt. So those are policies. Those are great news if they occur in the future year that we can evaluate. But for right now, we want to be conservative and just only assume these 2 years are grant funded. The next line is the Geo Bond. Oh, sorry, Lisa, one more. Is the Geo Bond. And the Geo Bond basically shows what we're asking the voters to approve. So we're hoping that those get funded by the Geo Bond and they don't get assessed on the stormwater fee, excuse me. If the citizens do not approve that, that means that Geo Bond will turn into a revenue bond. and all those will have to be issued as debt and proceed forward. So that is a big unknown, and we're hoping the best there. Next slide, please. So this slide is a visual graphic of a model that we're utilizing to look at the condition of the enterprise. And let me walk us through what these lines and charts show. So the first thing let's look at is the gold bars. That's the revenue that we're collecting from the stormwater service fee with no increase. As you can see, it's almost $5 million each year. Then let's go to the background slides, and the first one's the dark blue. That's the operating expense. That includes the additional O&M that I mentioned right there. The next one behind that is the next color, a little bit, yeah, thank you, Lisa, is the current debt service that we have on the book. You are having some new debt on the book coming online, so we take that into account. And then that teal color blue is the proposed debt. So you can see already as we issue all these debts, these costs are much higher than your revenues. And then you put in the capital expenditure, and you can see now we're far exceeding our costs. And because of that, we have the black line, and the black line is our ending balance. And we're drawing down on our reserves. And it's a negative slope, as you can see, and it's pretty steep, and it looks really bad in 26 when we have a negative ending fund balance. The red dot is the target reserve that we want to achieve. We want to be slightly above that. So right now we're healthy. You do have some bond proceeds in that, in the ending balance to fund some of these future for today's projects, capital, but we're not, in the out years meeting it. So some kind of increase is needed in order to make sure we're healthy and we meet this level of service that we've developed in this financial plan and associated costs. So this next slide, in summary, current revenues are not sufficient to pay for the increased operating costs for flood mitigation and future capital expenditures. Significant, I don't want to, make this sugarcoat anything here, but significant rate increase will be needed to meet future obligations. Now, not necessarily the good news, but slightly good news is that, your current fee is pretty low right now. And we are talking about a few more dollars increase, which can potentially alleviate this. And based on some preliminary surveys, it looks like you charge pretty low relative to other people. Now, it's a bit of an apple and oranges, and we can talk about that during the Q&A session if you like. So the next Water Commission will present 2 rate scenarios. As I mentioned, the one we're hoping for where the citizens approve the Geo Bond in November. And then some of these capital projects, as I mentioned, will be paid for by property tax and won't hit the stormwater books. If that does not get approved, though, then it has to be funded by rates, and then we'll have to show that. So we'll be showing both of those scenarios. I'm going to turn this back over to Ed to talk about the schedule.
Thank you, Sanjay. So yeah, the schedule here is what we're looking at moving forward. So as I mentioned, August 23rd, we'll be at a city council for the notice of intent. Then we'll have that rate analysis report shortly after that, another water commission meeting with a more formal presentation of the rate model and what we expect to put forward. We'll put those documents on the Water Service website right after the Water Commission meeting, which will also start the 60-day public notice as required by ARS. We'll have community outreach during that same time, September or October, with a copy going to the city clerk no less than 30 days before the public hearings. Council work session, October 25th. Newspaper notice the next day. Public hearing first read will come November 15th. And we'll have that ordinance and second read on November 29th at a special meeting. And we are really pushing hard to get that rate effective the start of 2023 calendar year. As Sanjay showed, we are, have a significant need here within the stormwater fund. So we're trying to move this forward as quickly as legally possible. Next slide. Some council options on the resolution. So they can direct staff to provide information, delay the adoption if they wish to September 18th. They can provide direction on future considerations if they do not adopt this resolution moving forward, whether that is other considerations, how to address the change in service through other increases. Not really sure what that would be, or whether we have direction on service level reductions. So reducing our level of service to meet our existing needs. I see Rick is typing it up in the chat. So if you want to speak up, Rick, I'd be happy to let you discuss that a little more.
No, I don't think I have any further thing to add. And I did just notice that September 18th, I think we have an error. It's actually September 20th.
Yeah.
Is that meeting? I think we just had an error in calculating that.
All right. Next slide then.
That's it.
That's it. Cool. Thanks. Thanks everybody for sticking through there. And if we have any comments, questions, both myself, Sanjay, Rick, whoever will be happy to help.
John Nauman here. I had a question about the CIP budget by year. Could you maybe go back to that slide?
Is this the one you wanted?
Yeah, that's the one I wanted. I was just curious about the timing of the funding. We've got a lot going, but I noticed the pipeline fire stuff doesn't start until 25, 26. Could you explain what the timing, why that timing?
I can jump in on this. This is Lisa Deem. This is just a placeholder. We knew we would be spending money on the pipeline fire. We didn't know how much and we didn't know when. So we just put it in on there. Your capital plan moves, the projects can move forward or behind in the schedule based on what the need is and the money availability. We just wanted to get it on the charts. So that's why it's there, and it's giving us more of a balanced project look to it, because if we added all of the pipeline all in 1 year, it would be an awful lot in 1 year that we may not have the financial capacity for. So it doesn't mean that it's not getting done in the next year or two. It just means that maybe some of these other projects may not happen as quickly and might get moved back. It simply was put in there as a placeholder. Does that help?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to make sure that was restricting the way you're planning. So thank you.
And John, this is Gary. I just wanted to add a little clarity to that as well, in that it is a goal of water services of the county. And I attended a meeting with the county yesterday in terms of flood response, and doing this emergency flood response on an annual basis is very detrimental to our budgets. And so it's a goal to try and get these long-term mitigation projects in place as quickly as possible so that we're out of that emergency response as quickly as possible. Personally, I would like to see us get to that place within the next 2 years, which would mean completing some of those pipeline fire projects. But obviously there are other resources that play into that in terms of being able to deliver those projects. But that is the goal.
Thank you, Lisa and Gary. Appreciate it.
Do we have any other questions, commissioners? Do you have any prepared questions or comments? Now's the time. Okay, hearing none, let's move on to the next agenda item. Before I do that, I do want to I guess agree with that last comment. My comment is an agreement. Getting mitigation in place to eliminate that that crisis management cost is an efficient use of money, and it makes a lot of sense because the mitigation is money well spent and the crisis management isn't. It's money down the drain. So for sooner we can get out of the crisis mode, that's better. Malcolm, I see a hand up.
Yeah, can you guys hear me now?
I can.
Okay,
Yes.
I apologize. I've had a lot of problems with internet, and hopefully you haven't heard me cuss or anything. Anyway, I have several comments, if I could, on this subject, and I'm just going to kind of throw them all out there at once, kind of a stream of consciousness that I've tried to write down a little bit. So, number one, of course, I take exception with the county responsible for unincorporated areas, which implies only. And, in the to and from and the informational items, I want to say something about that item because I think the commission has discussed before about how if we can get the flood control district to help out with our needs, since they take all of our money, that could impact this rate. As a matter of fact, previously we talked about that being a big issue that needs to be addressed before this goes forward. Number two, the credit manual may not be obsolete. You should be careful. There's a political element in there where we provide 10% credit for people putting up a couple of rain barrels. So if you just get rid of the rain barrel credit, it could create some controversy with some folks in the community. I'd also point out that the credit manual allows opportunities to go beyond standard LID and detention. If someone were to provide additional on-site retention, they can get additional credit. So think about that. Number three, Sanjay was talking about rates compared to others. I think we should see that. I don't think it needs to happen right now necessarily, but that was obviously a question I had. But in number four, that ties into that, what do we anticipate the rates to increase to? Is to and from or percentage or something? Is it going to be sticker shock for the community? And that's all I have. Thank you.
Would anyone like to answer or address those comments? Go ahead, please.
Thanks. Yeah, this is Gary again. Malcolm, I caught on to a couple of your comments. I might have, there were 4 total. I'm going to miss one, so you might have to remind me what they were. The first comment regarding the county, we have asked the county if they would like to participate in this forum in terms of addressing some of the concerns you talked about. To date, they haven't accepted that offer. And one of the thoughts or plans we had was to, if there were any specific questions that the commission would like to ask of the county, we're prepared to take notes on that and forward those questions to the flood control district and maybe elicit a written response in that way. So if that's something the commission would like to pursue, we're prepared to do that today. The question about benchmarking, so looking at other cities, I was about to send Ed an email because that came up during the presentation briefly. Ed had found a figure from, I think it was the University of Kentucky, or I don't remember where it was from exactly, University of Western Kentucky. And that's something, I don't know if that's appropriate to share. I was going to forward that to Ed and suggest that maybe we include that in the council presentation, but let us take a look at that. And if appropriate, we can definitely send that out. I think it's pretty telling in terms of where we fall within the rest of the country. That being said, I know there's a lot of disparity in the services provided based on those fees. stormwater for the city of Flagstaff may look very different than a stormwater department in another part of the country. They might provide different services. So I'm a little hesitant to share it on the fly without giving that some more thought. And so those were only two of the questions. Malcolm, can you remind me what the other two were?
Well, sure, Gary. It was just number two was just a be careful, if you will, getting rid of the rain barrel credit and that kind of thing. So I don't think you guys really need to address that. Just be aware that it's could become a political issue just to get rid of the credit manual in that regard. Because I know a lot of people like rain barrels. And then the last one was simply, what do we anticipate the rate to go to? We've seen the capital budget now. We've seen charts and graphs. What are you guys talking about?
I hesitate to provide any level of detail at this point in time. The notice of intent that goes to council really is just that. It's just, hey, we're looking at the rates. I mean, I'd be lying if I said we didn't have any idea, but there's still some additional analysis that we need to do to make sure that we're covering all of the projected costs that we have. So I know we'll share that as soon as we can, but we didn't feel it was appropriate at this time to share those specifics. And Water Commission will certainly be the first to know what those look like, I believe.
Thanks, Gary. And then I guess the only other thing is, if the commission wants to discuss now what we want to see from the county, I guess I'd throw that back up to the chair, or we could discuss it in the to and froms. I'm not sure what's appropriate or where it's appropriate to do that. So I don't want to be out of line. So I'll punt that back to the chair.
Yeah, that might be an old business here, but it also definitely touches directly on the stormwater rate assessment update that we're discussing now. So I think that is on the agenda, and it's totally fair game for us to dig into right now, if I'm not mistaken. So let's discuss and let's decide what sort of action we'd like to see. I'll start, or maybe go second after Malcolm. I agree. I think that it has been, ever since the policy change where the county has started collecting tax revenues from the city and its residents. This has been something that needs to get resolved. And now that COVID is ebbing and we're getting back to business as usual, and now that the city is talking about a stormwater rate increase to deal with the fires of the aftermath, and particularly given that those fires and floods originate on non-city land, which is not incorporated land and is part of the county. I think that this is really a critical issue now. This needs to get resolved. The question of how the county is going to work with the city in terms of funding. So from my personal opinion, I would like to see that conversation happen now. And I do expect it'll be a little bit painful and contentious, but we really can't move ahead with the financial aspects of rate setting. We can plan, but I don't know that we can vote and recommend to the council to vote on these things until we have clarity about what's going on with the county. Action, please.
Yeah, this is Malcolm, if I could. I wanted to talk about this because I want to tell you I'm somewhat frustrated with the county in that I asked their public information officer how to request copies of their budget and expenditures. There was no reply. It's been 3 weeks. So about a week ago, I asked him, any luck? No reply. A couple days ago, I sent him my last one, which he has not replied to, of course, which is, how do I do a records request? Because I remember at the city days, I could go not that I would, but somebody could go up to the city clerk and do a records request to get information. So to me, it's as simple as how much did they collect? How much did they spend in the city? How much did they, collect for the next 5-year budget? And how much do they expect to spend in the city? And if those numbers are despair, sorry, I can't find the right word, but if they're not fair, then I think that speaks a lot for itself, and then maybe council wants to take that up. But right now, we don't have the basic numbers. We don't know how much they take in and how much of that they spend in the city, both in the past and in the future. Isn't it really that, those are the numbers we really need? Isn't it that simple?
I'm just taking notes. I will reiterate what I've heard or understood from the commission. I wasn't intending to respond at this point in time, unless the discussion has ended.
This is John Nauman. I would really like to reinforce what Malcolm has said. And my question is who is better at interfacing with the U.S. Forest Service? Is it the city? Is it the county? Do they both hold equal weight? Because a lot of these projects are going to be on county Forest Service land that will affect Flagstaff. So not only within the city, but with, let's say, upstream on Schultz Creek, who is kicking in on what, and how do we get coordination with those entities and get those numbers? For the rate study, I think that's an important, some important numbers. What's the county and the Forest Service doing on this stuff?
Other commissioners, we've heard from 3. There's 2 more. Would the other 2 like to chip in?
On bills, I have my hand raised. Kind of as a follow-up to the 2 comments already made, would it be possible for the Water Commission to invite representatives from the county and the Forest Service to speak to us on these topics? Or is that something that they're not likely to want to engage in?
I imagine the staff don't have an answer for whether they'd like to engage. But from my perspective, I would support that invitation. I think that we'd probably want to put it on the agenda, maybe 2 months out to give people plenty of time to prepare. But because that'll be an interesting conversation for sure, and might draw a lot of attention. But I'd support that. And in particular, I'd support extending the invitation. I think that would be great.
Mr. Vice Chair, I can jump in and add a comment or 2. This is
Yes,
Brad
please,
Hill, the interim director. So staff has made that offer back for the July meeting, and we didn't receive a response, but we're happy to reach back out again for your September meeting when this topic is on the agenda, and or for your October meeting. But staff's clearly happy to. We did not, let me clarify, that was just to the county, Don. We did not offer extend to the Forest Service, but staff's happy to do so on behalf of the commission for the October or September meeting.
Brad, before you sign off there on that, Malcolm had a question in the comments. Can't staff get copies of the flood control district budgets and distill? And I don't know that I have an answer to that.
So one of the offers that we had talked about was that we would formally through city to county channels, if staff isn't successful at the staff level, if we can obtain information, and we can actually absolutely add that, Malcolm, to our request not only just a list of questions that I think Gary and I know myself and probably Marion as well has taken notes of this conversation, but also that kind of detailed information that you were just discussing. We could absolutely add that to our request.
This is Joe Leverage. I guess I have a couple of thoughts. It seems that this is kind of a reoccurring issue, or not issue, but question as far as how the interaction between county flood control district, their fees, and various cities throughout the county. And so, I would support, just understanding better what the dynamic between the city of Flagstaff and Coconino County Flood Control District is on the fees, how they're used, and how that integration is. As far as the Forest Service goes, the Forest Service is a different bear. So I don't think they really need to be in that conversation myself, but I would support a little more discussion between city and flood control district.
I agree that these are two different conversations, at least from a legal point of view. Is there any objection from commissioners to us giving direction to the staff on 2 points? First, to seek budgetary information, and second, to renew the invitation for a discussion at an upcoming public meeting. With the county specifically. Okay, so staff, please take note, and please take that as your direction to seek that input on the county's role in particular. I do suggest reaching out to the Forest Service as well for participation in an upcoming meeting, but let's do the county first. And let's try and make sure we have their budget information well in advance of them showing up at a meeting.
So, Mr. Vice Chair, if I could, I just wanted to reiterate some of the questions that I took and see if I missed anything. I just want to make sure we didn't miss any of the comments.
Go ahead, please.
So the first one I wrote, since the county has started collecting revenues from the city, and now that the city is considering raising rates, how does the county intend to work with the city on future fire flooding projects? And then I made a note of previous public requests have been made for the flood control district expenditures. That wasn't necessarily a question, but then the questions following that were, how much do they collect? How much do they spend in the city? How much do they expect to collect and spend in the next 5 years? So, along those same lines. Another question I heard was, who is better with interfacing with the national forest, county, or city? So is it the county's role or is it the city's role to, and maybe that's a question staff can answer without going to the county. How much does the Forest Service plan to spend? We just talked about Forest Service. Can city staff get copies of the flood control district budgets and distill for the Water Commission? I highlighted that one as some of the final direction that you just gave. And then would it be possible to have the flood control district and the Forest Service come to speak to these topics at a Water Commission meeting? And then a general note from Joe, would like to gain a better understanding of the interaction between the city and flood control district when it comes to funding. Somewhat redundant, but I wanted to make sure I captured it all. And that's all I have.
That sounds great to me. I would add emphasis on one point, which it may be implicit here, but we are specifically concerned, in addition to the general questions that you just brought up, we're specifically concerned about what they are planning on spending and doing related to the flooding that is coming off the peaks, right? So that's our pain point right now. And it would be great to know, the same kinds of things that we're talking about in this water commission. Who's going to pay for this? Are we going to be doing emergency management versus mitigation? When are we doing the mitigation? Where's the money coming from? Are we writing grants? Are we raising rates? Those questions all apply to the county as well. And it seems like we should be coordinating and also haggling in appropriate ways. So, and I think the onus is on us to push that point, because the city is the downstream partner here. So nobody's going to push for us.
I would just, this is John Nauman again. I would just emphasize that what the county spends on outside the city limits on flood mitigation for the city, like at the projects on Schultz Creek or possible projects, should be included in what they're spending on flood stormwater for Flagstaff too, because that's critical.
Thank you. Exactly my point.
One last thought from Malcolm is, and I think some of you have already touched on it. In a perfect world, there is communication and coordination through some kind of a committee, staff. I'm not sure what, but there is a formal communication on budgeting and where they're spending it. And Ben, I think you said something about haggling in the right ways or whatever. But yeah, there should be, in the end, there should be some kind of a formal communication between the two entities to look at where they're spending the city's money. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Let's move on to the next item of new business, which is the Commission on Council Salaries. Thank you very much, Ed and company, for the rate assessment update. We have Shannon Anderson. Shannon, are you here? Looks like you are. Please go ahead with the Commission on Council Salaries. Does this mean, first and most importantly, does this mean that the Water Commission is going to be paid now?
No, this conversation is specific to our city council members, mayor, vice mayor, and then the council. But I appreciate the question for sure. I know this commission, as well as our others, are very dedicated, and we really appreciate your time and input and research, feedback, so on. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to come and meet with you. I am an employee of the city manager's office. My name is Shannon Anderson. I'm one of the deputy city managers. One of my tasks is to help with council salaries. There is a section in city code that talks about the mayor and council salaries, and it also sets up a process where if there's a request to review those salaries, that we engage in that process. That process includes 4 community members, which we have been able to secure commission members to fill those 4 vacancies. And in addition, there's also 5 commission members from other city commissions that actually serve on the Citizen Commission for Council Salaries. And one of them is the Water Commission. So I'm here today to ask if one of your members would be willing and able to serve on the Citizen Commission for Council Salaries. To tell you a little bit about the process, I've been through it once before. It included about 2, sometimes 3 meetings, because that middle one sometimes can be to bring back additional information that's asked for after the first conversation. Meetings usually last about an hour in length. So we anticipate to start this process in September and to be able to finish no later than October, because then the next step would be to take the recommendation from this Council Salaries Commission to Council for consideration. So it does not apply to the current seated council, but it would apply following its adoption to any newly seated council members. So my request today is if somebody might be interested and able to help us out in this situation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have to the best of my ability.
Questions and discussion, please, commissioners. And is there anyone present who has an interest in doing that?
John Elman here. I might be interested in doing this, but unfortunately, that is exactly the time I'll be gone on vacation for a month. So it kind of kills that. But I was just curious, is there a feeling that since we did not have many council members get on the ballot, is that have anything to do with the salary? I'm just kind of curious.
Thanks for that question. No, this request was actually made by the previous council, but it's been very difficult to find 4 members from the community that were willing to serve. So it took us a little while to be able to fill those seats. I think the hardest part was 2 of those community members need to have an HR background or be an HR professional. So it just took us a while to have those 4 positions filled. So no, it's not related to the most recent situation in which we're having the write-in election for the council seats.
What were the dates of the meetings again, please? I didn't take note.
Thank you for that question. So we haven't set the dates yet. We're trying to get all the members identified so that then I can reach out to them and we can find some common dates that they can all get together. But the hope is to be able to finish up this process in October. So we'd meet probably September, maybe early October if we needed to.
And what's the expected time commitment, total time commitment?
So it's usually 2 to 3 meetings, and the meetings are typically an hour in length.
Okay. So why don't you put my name down? We will try to get more participation than that, but put my name down as interested. It's not an area of expertise of mine. I have no HR background, and I have really nothing to contribute other than my role as a general citizen of the public. But I am a professor, and I have an anecdote to share in case it motivates anyone to action. At the founding of our republic, that's the United States, not Arizona. The leaders, the founding fathers, they were writing the policies and procedures for our government, and almost all of them were rich guys, and they were pretty privileged, rich group, and they decided that public office in the United States should be unpaid because only people who really wanted to do it and had the right motivations would then do it. It was volunteer position. And John Adams stood up, and he was the farmer on the team, Massachusetts farmer, and he said, no way, you need to pay people, and you need to pay them well, because if you don't, running our country is going to be just a rich person's hobby. It's not going to be something that ordinary people can do. And so for that reason, which remains true to this day, I think that making sure that we pay our officials appropriately remains a very important civic issue. One of the most important, in fact.
Yeah, and Chair, that really kind of follows what the council had in mind when they originally made this request, and that was they didn't want being able to be an actual council member only to be a possibility for those who might be self-employed or retired. And so that was part of their conversation as well, that if we as an organization and as a community could pay a competitive or a comparable salary to our council members, it might create diversity and the opportunity for folks to participate in that position who otherwise wouldn't be able to. So that certainly was part of their conversation as well.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Please
thank you
leave
for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Please leave your contact information in the chat so that anybody who has a change of heart here in the next few minutes can reach out and volunteer.
Sounds great. Thank you very much for your time today.
Okay. Thanks. Goodbye. New business, third item, fires and floods, Schultz to pipeline and the interbasin water line. Brian Hunsinger, are you in? Yes, you are. Welcome, Brian. Please let us know about fires and floods and the interbasin water line.
Good evening, Water Commission. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Yep. Here to talk about the interbasin water line through both the Schultz and pipeline fires. I won't get too much into the history of Flagstaff's water supplies, though there is some nice work that was published today in the paper by a Flagstaff resident and roving ranger, John Knoll. For this presentation, I just have a couple early pictures. Here's early Flagstaff on the upper left, San Francisco Mountain Boulevard. This is what later became Schultz Pass. The both railroad and timber industry heavily influenced Flagstaff's early water supplies. And then in this upper picture, you see the original interbasin water line and how the clay pipe were carried by horseback. The first pipeline was laid in the late 1800s or 1890s. That was a 6-inch clay pipe. Can everybody see my mouse?
Yes.
Yes.
Later in the early 1900s, an 8-inch clay pipe was added to increase flow. In the 1930s, both of those lines were abandoned for a 15-inch concrete pipe. And then in the 90s, the concrete was replaced by a 16-inch ductile iron pipe in the upper portion of the water line. The lower portion of the water line is still the concrete pipe from the 30s. For the first half century, is mainly spring water that traveled through the interbasin water line and supplied Flagstaff. However, in the late 60s and 70s, the interbasin wells were drilled and added to the supply. Spring flow can peak as high as 2 million gallons per day. The interbasin wells have about as much flow, or 2 million gallons per day. The North Reservoir filtration plant, where both water sources end up at the bottom of the hill, has a design capacity of about 4 million gallons. In the picture is our interbasin well number 9. In June of 2010, the Schultz fire burned over 15,000 acres, including much of the land surrounding the Waterline Road. Here you see the San Francisco peaks aglow in the evening. Here's a map of the Schultz fire. You can see, for reference, this is Highway 89, and you can see the interbasin here. Here's the Waterline Road after the Schultz fire, but before any monsoon rains. And after the following monsoon season, due to the rain and erosion that happened off the Waterline Road, here's some examples of what happened to the interbasin pipeline. The pipeline was exposed in 17 locations. 28 Waterline Road drainage crossings were impassable, led to emergency declarations from the city, county, governor, and then President Obama in October of that year. With FEMA and BEMA funding, this led to the city contracting Jacobs engineering firm and Hunter Contracting. This was a design build project, both relocation and reconstruction. The total cost of the project was about $4.5 million. That was funded 75% by FEMA, 15% by the Arizona Department of Emergency Management, and 10% by the city. Here on the left, you see the relocation of the pipeline. This was primarily to get the pipeline out of what became wilderness. Involved about 3,600 feet of replacement pipeline. Here you see a map with the 28 sites that Hunter and Jacobs addressed, starting higher in elevation down to the higher number lower in elevation. Here you see one of the designs for the structures put in drainages to both protect the pipeline within, but also the waterline road. You can see riprap, gabion baskets, concrete pad below. This is a side view profile with the levels of gabions reaching pretty high in this structure. This was site number 2. Here you see Hunter staff assembling the structure. This again is site number 2 with the gabion baskets. You can see this one had a pretty steep elevation. Hunter staff putting the concrete cap on the top of site 7. Here's some before and after pictures. You can see in the upper left picture, this is the Waterline Road in July of 2010, after or before any rain events. And this lower picture in August after rains had eroded the drainages. And then here you see the structure that Hunter Jacobs put in place. Another before-after picture. This is site 2 that we've looked at before. Here, this is the site that had a severed piece of pipeline. You can see in the before picture down below, and then the structure that Hunter put in place. This boulder is for reference. And here's site 2 after completion of the structure. For the most part, these structures have held up well over the last decade. We've not had any broken breaks in the pipeline. They do require annual maintenance, primarily from my staff, to keep any debris that flows over the top of the structures. But for the most part, they've done well. Here's just a picture of the upper waterline road that I took last fall or in late 2021 until the pipeline fire. This is a similar stretch of upper waterline road after the pipeline fire in June of this year. Similar to the Schultz fire, this is the San Francisco Peaks aglow in the evening of the pipeline fire. Here you see a map of the pipeline fire. Again, for reference, Highway 89. You can see the pipeline pushed a little further to the west, to the north and northeast. While the Schultz was about 15,000 acres, pipeline fire grew to over 26,000 acres, including lands previously burned by the Schultz fire in and around the Waterline Road, but additional lands. This is an upper drainage on the Waterline Road after both the pipeline fire, but also a couple weeks of rain events from this monsoon season. We were notified by the Forest Service of this the weekend of July 4th. This picture was taken on July 5th. You can see the pipeline was still intact at this point. You can also see the vintage pipelines. Here's a 6-inch clay pipe, 8-inch clay pipe, and the 15-inch concrete. Here's site 2 again. You can see it's in pretty good shape. There's some debris on top of the structure. Again, this was taken on July 5th. You can see some of this fabric is showing, which is a sign of some erosion on the side, but for the most part, the structure is intact and looking good. On the left is site 8, also taken on July 5th. A little more substantial debris flow, but again, for the most part, structure intact. Also seen on July 5th were these log barriers. Hunter Jacobs installed 23 of these log barriers all along the road. Prior to the pipeline fire, these had logs in them to keep the road from eroding down. Most of these log structures that were seen on the 5th either did not have any logs remaining or for the most part were no longer functional. Here's a map with the original Hunter Jacobs sites on it that I just drew some lines and gave to our emergency management director. This is the area or the upper drainage where the exposed pipe was that we saw earlier. You can see it's outside the sites that Hunter Jacobs addressed that were placed after the Schultz fire. There was also things that I saw on July 5th that I tried to notate here. The damages have been ongoing though, and it's been a pretty active monsoon season. This was drone imagery taken by city staff later on July 20th. As you can see, the drainage has significantly widened, further exposing the pipe, which then broke it or ruptured. Additional drone imagery taken on July 20th. This is site 20. You can see that there's significant debris flow. For the most part, the structure's intact and without any exposed pipeline. You can see there's starting to be some gabion basket failures or damages. Like I said, damages are occurring. This is well outside the Waterline Road. This is Schultz Pass Road, seen just a week or so ago on August 8th. This portion of the road is currently impassable. As we've seen in other pictures, here's the vintage clay pipe. You can see underneath the side of Schultz Pass, also pieces of that clay pipe. When I saw this erosion on that day, I didn't notice any concrete pipe showing, but it's most likely close to this clay pipe. This is drone imagery taken just last Friday or August 12th. As you can see, the drainage has continued to widen. You can now see these joints or couplings of the pipeline. There's not a whole lot left in the Waterline Road on the left, and pretty sheer drop. This is site 20, also taken last Friday or August 12th. You can see there's more of the gabion basket failures or damages, more significant erosion on the side of the structure, debris flows. This is site 8, also on the 12th of this month. Similar to the other structure, there's not a whole lot of the Waterline Road left here, pretty sheer drop. Significant erosion on the lateral or sides of the structure. This is site 7, a common theme. We're seeing significant erosion off the side of the structure, significant debris flow. And even from this elevation of the drone, you can see there's undercutting of the structure. Site 4, also with erosion. On this one, the gabion baskets look to still be in good shape, but still some erosion to the sides of the structure. Site 24, pretty good sized boulder here, pretty significant flows. For the most part, the structure looks intact. Maybe some gabion basket failure here in the middle. This is another example of a log barrier without many logs remaining, debris flows. This is site 16. Looks to be intact. However, you can see that there's 16-inch ductile pipe exposed on the side. Here's some of the vintage clay pipe in the side of the hill. Not much of the road remains, and this is a pretty sheer drop. Gabion basket failure and pretty good erosion on the side, or significant on the side of the structure. And lastly, just another example of the log barriers that were installed by Hunter Jacobs after the Schultz fire, no longer with any of the logs in them, and just some of the hillsides that are sloughing off into the road. So it's not just the drainages that are affecting the road, but also just the slopes. And that was all I had. Are there any questions?
This John Nauman here. I'm just curious, from what I understand, we didn't use any water from the Interbasin last year. Obviously, we're not going to be using any water from the Interbasin this year, or at least after these fires and flooding. So what's the plan?
What's the plan in reference to what?
Well, is the city planning on repairing the line and the road that supports it, or am I asking a question too far and too soon?
So, like I tried to show, damages are ongoing. I did send that map with existing damages to our city's emergency management director. That has led to a city, county, and governor declaration of emergency. You're right in that we had not used interbasin springs or wells for the year. We also did not use them last year. The next step for the city is will be to get an engineer's opinion of probable costs for the damages to the pipeline and the waterline road. Hopefully with Arizona Department of Emergency Management and possibly FEMA funding, we'll repair the road and the pipeline. If it's anything like the work that Hunter Jacobs did after the Schultz fire, that took 2 years to complete. So the water line was not available until I believe October of 2012, or really the summer of 2013. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that answered the question. Is there maybe somebody at the meeting can answer this? Why was water not used in the previous year? Was it a lack of water availability, or was it something else going on?
In 2021, there was minimal spring flow that came off the mountain. We also had a pipeline break closer to the North Reservoir filtration plant, or towards the bottom of the hill, and along with a leaking valve. So due to infrastructure repairs closer to the bottom of the hill, but also lack of spring flow, there wasn't really enough flow or time to use the source in 2021. This year, we had planned on opening up the road the week that the pipeline fire started. After the pipeline fire started, I made the decision to not even plan on using the source due to the history of what occurs after these types of fires, specifically with the Schultz.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that, Brian.
Mr. Chair, can I jump in here for a moment?
Yes, please.
Or Vice Chair? Yeah, so I had asked Brian if he would give this slideshow because I thought it was important for the commission to see, kind of learn a little bit or remind folks I was here. I was actually director. I just started being director when this fire started back in 2011. And kind of the lessons learned or the efforts that went into rehabilitating Pipeline Road and the pipeline, or Waterline Road and the pipeline. And I thought it was useful to kind of get everyone back up to speed because as Brian mentioned, the city's going to be engaging and make evaluations, cost estimates to rehabilitate both the road again and the pipeline. And then I think he was a really good demonstration of lessons learned of how most of those infrastructure stayed intact, and portion, I think just except for one where there's actually a water line exposed at the structure. So I just thought it was useful for the commission to learn, and then because you'll probably be hearing more about this in the coming months of exactly what the city's going to do with this supply and the potential, design and mitigation efforts. So thank you for Brian for doing that from my perspective.
Thank you, Brad. So it sounds like we did learn some things, and it did hold up better this time, which is great. Hopefully, we won't need to learn a third time. We have a comment from Aaron Young, who says that non-use of the wells or spring water in interbasin should not be perceived as a supply that's unimportant to our overall water supply portfolio. There are large capital dollars needed to invest in that aging system, in addition to what Brian has stated. Thank you, Aaron. I would add a couple more points here, just as observations. So first point is that the interbasin system, and the spring in particular, it is the city's only clean gravity-fed supply, and because of that, it's a very important resilience feature in our city. In other words, we have 5 or 10% of our water available, right? Even when other things may be not working. And so it is a very, even though it's a small fraction of the city's water supply, it has a unique reliability value. And then the other thing to point out is that with this damage that's occurred, there may be an opportunity to do some of that rehabilitation of aging system using federal recovery dollars. They're there for recovery, not for maintenance, but sometimes when you're recovering and repairing things, you end up replacing old components, and it reduces your need to spend other money on that. So might be an opportunity. Are there any other comments for Brian on Interbasin and Waterline Road?
I was thinking the same thing you were thinking, Ben, about taking advantage of the funds available right now to make repairs. I kind of saved these two questions. I probably should have brought them up in the earlier part of our discussions, but I've been watching the rain gauges for the west side of the tunnel fire, and I would advise maybe putting one or two more in the middle part of that burn scar, if it's possible, to get a better, more accurate view of what's going on precipitation wise. Maybe if we have stream gauges on Schultz Creek and the other drainage that feeds into Cheshire, perhaps providing that information live stream, and maybe some good radar sites that give us, minute by minute, updates on radar information. So somebody in the community could click on that to get information. I know this doesn't relate just exactly to that. And my last thing is, I would be curious. I saw a report from the Daily Sun from 2019 about what would happen if the entire southwest side of the peaks burned, and what kind of hazard that would lead to. And and how that might relate to how the city interacts with the Forest Service and the county, and not only mitigation of thinning and that kind of stuff, but also land management and what I call a floodscape, possible floodscape for the city. So I'm just throwing this out for the maybe a future commission meeting down the road to think about. So sorry about interjecting that now, but I thought I needed to mention something along those lines.
Thank you. Those are interesting points. It's an interesting idea. I want to ask if there's any other questions or comments for the team. Yeah, so hearing none, let's move on. Skipping past old business, for which there is none, to informational items to and from the chair, commission, or staff. So this is our chance to provide information only, not discussion, about, or at least not debate, about informational items among the staff and the commission. So staff, do you have anything? Marion? Bill? Brad?
So I do, just the one that's on here, and that is a reminder to the commission that next month at your direction, we'll transition to a hybrid format. So Marion, and I'll let her jump in, but so she'll be reaching out so we know who's going to be attending at City Hall and not, so we can kind of gauge. We're going to transition this to how city council meetings are run. So I just wanted to remind everyone of that. And Marion, if you have things you want to share, please do.
Yes, as we all know, Stacy, city clerk, sent out an email apologizing for not issuing parking permits, but the city is allowing commission members to park right across City Hall, the front entrance in Wheeler Park parking lot. And so we'll try that, and they are not issuing tickets in that area. And as they are busy right now, so as time goes, maybe another month or two, they will contact the commissioners for the permits. And also, I will be asking when I send out agendas next month, if you plan to attend in person or virtual. So if I can get replies, I know I have to ask twice to some commissioners if they plan to attend the meeting. That would help a lot. And I think, Brad, I'm not sure if we have at least two commission members that are going to attend in person. Are we still planning to have a meeting in person? Or
Yeah,
should we
Marion.
just go virtual?
Yeah, Marion, I don't think we've made that decision. I'd reach to the clerk and kind of see how they do in parallel what they do with city council. If there's a metric there, if only two show up, that we just do it all virtual.
Okay, I'll get with the city
That's really a
clerk on
good
that.
question. Yeah, I would just defer
Yeah.
to her.
Okay, that's all I have. And again, do reply to my emails when it goes out, me asking if you plan to attend in person or virtual. That's all I have.
Okay.
This is Joe Leverage. Just
Joe.
one informational thing, John, to kind of throw your way with those rain gauges. There were 3 new rain gauges installed this year up in the wilderness area. Those gauges had to be a little bit different style than the normal standpipe type areas, because we couldn't have couldn't pour concrete up there. And so there are 3 new rain gauges to kind of fill in the upper part of the watershed a little bit. Also on Schultz Creek, there's a pressure transducer at the gauge halfway up Schultz Creek and one at 180. And so those are stage sensors for understanding the flow rate, and there's a camera up there on Schultz Creek itself at the gauge. So there's a couple different pieces of information that you can all get on the Coconino County Alert website for the Schultz side.
Oh, great.
It's a whole, yeah, it's a different bear installing in the wilderness with those rain gauges, and so it was a struggle to get those 3 additional, but we were able to do that. And then to the 2019 study referenced, it's not burning, that didn't burn the whole south side of the peaks. That was the upper Rio watershed, everything draining into Fort Valley. So between the Big Canyon, or not Big Canyon, but between the divide between Agassiz and Fremont, from there over to Schultz, there wasn't Schultz Pass. There wasn't any fire in that study. So it's just what would happen if the upper Rio watershed burnt.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
Any other informational items, please? Hearing none, I move to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second?
John Alman, I'll second.
John, great. We have a second. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, the ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned 5:32 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for your contribution. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Ben.
All right. Thank
Thanks.
you all.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.